everybody deserves a sanctuary. But sometimes a familiar sanctuary can trigger a lack of peace. If I see a picture of my late best friend on the mantle, who is now dead, that's sometimes going to make me feel really happy and good to see her face. And other times, it's going to cause pain. And so abandoned spaces in that way, they provided an out for me, but they also provided an in to myself. And I think that's the power of ghosts. Ghosts ask us to ask really hard questions about ourselves, and find peace in who we are.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to No Set Path. I'm your host, Drew English. So what happens when you refuse to pick a lane? Today, I'm talking with Blake Pfeil, the multidisciplinary artist behind All American Ruins. Blake creates immersive audio stories about abandoned places, recently won an Ambie Award for his podcast, and has zero interest in being put on a pedestal as an expert. We dig into why choosing one thing never really worked for him, how abandoned spaces became a tool for healing and recovery, and what it means to be really good at just being yourself. As always, if you're enjoying these conversations, please leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your shows. Like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube as well. Also, check out my newsletter called Creative Balance on Substack at thedrewenglish.substack.com for more thoughts on building something meaningful as a creative entrepreneur without burning out. Now, without any further delay, let's jump into my conversation with Blake Pfeil. I think like being open and being vulnerable and being willing to talk about more than the average person, I think is kind of like a superpower and something I'm trying to get better at. Like this, like a year ago or more, would have been very awkward for me to just sit down and like put myself in front of a camera. Well, yeah, I mean,
interesting.
I've spent 10 years behind a camera. Being in front of it's weird.
There's no better way I have discovered to learn how to get vulnerable than to turn a camera on and talk about things that you wouldn't normally talk about.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. We're one step removed from like live streaming. So we can edit,
right.
If we want, but
right.
I mean, even this, I mean, we have hung out once.
One time. A while ago. Yeah.
Which I really enjoyed. And it's like,
same.
I feel like we're both like into like pretty open communication. So it was easy, but still, it's like you sit down with people you don't know and ask them to like get very like vulnerable and open.
Yeah.
Just like on the fly in front of a bunch of cameras.
Yeah. It'll also never not be awkward with or without the cameras.
Totally.
I mean, in a way, this instrument almost makes it easier because your brain, at least for me, automatically has an intention. That is, we are creating content that will then be released for the purpose of building a brand. Whereas a conversation at a bookstore over, tea and beer is a completely different ballgame with a stranger.
It's completely different. And I'm one of those people where I think faster than I can talk often. So,
interesting.
Yeah, so I'll, in normal conversation, kind of stumble over myself. And oftentimes I feel like I could be better spoken than I usually am. But for some reason, this, like having a lens pointed at you is just like, oh, you need to be very clear on what you're thinking. And like, I don't know. It just makes me speak a little more clearly. Unintentionally. It's like, I don't think about it. It just kind of happens.
And well, am I allowed to look in the camera?
Sure.
These are, it's kind of like, I treat cameras like the New York City subway system.
Okay.
Where it's like really hard to learn, but super easy to master. Like once you understand the tricks of how to kind of treat it like a person or put your best friend's face on the lens, suddenly it becomes just like a practicing game. And now I actually feel really comfortable in front of a camera, which before that was not the case.
Yeah, it's kind of like riding a bike.
We just shot the 3rd episode of All American Ruins with Hudsey back in October.
Yeah.
They had a new camera. And so I had gotten used to these first 2 gimbal-based cameras.
Yeah.
And then they brought this new thing in, and I was like, whoa, hold on.
Something's different.
Something's
changed.
Feels weird. But it was fun. It's fun to... I used to hate learning new instruments because I thought it meant that I was somehow inept or stupid. And now I love a challenge of learning something new. It just is like, I look forward to kind of being in the dark about something only to illuminate it a little bit. Anyway, thank you, camera.
That's a good attitude to have. You know, as an aside, I've toyed around with, and it still may happen, kind of like pivoting the name for this, for a few different reasons. But right now it's called No Set Path, right? And the whole idea, which I'll probably cut this part out. This is really just more for you because I've said it a million freaking times on this show. But it's just to illustrate that like no two roads are the same, right? You get from A to B it looks completely different for any two people.
Yes.
And it's like, so just acknowledging that every single person has a completely different path and a completely different background and are disposed in completely different ways.
Yes.
Like that solves a lot of problems, in my opinion. Like
Absolutely.
the acknowledgement and the acceptance and things like that. So I spend a lot of mental and emotional energy, especially now, just like racking my brain with like the question of why things need to be so difficult when they really don't need to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's this is like the conundrum question that, you know, if let's just go like full existential here for a second. Like, I did not mean to happen. The planet didn't mean to happen. We can put as much fairy tale meaning into why the Earth exists and why the universe exists and what it all means. But those complications, first of all, are rooted in power and patriarchy. So like, let's put those over here and like acknowledge that everybody's afraid to die. Nobody knows what happens after we die. And I did not mean to happen. This wasn't like a choice that I made. And so I think the same is true for planet Earth, the universe, and whatever extends beyond those borders, is just like, actually, no, it is so very simple. We don't know why. It doesn't matter why. Here's the thing, folks. This is quoting my friend Isabel. Nobody gets out of this video game alive.
True story.
Period. So to like complicate things, which we're right to do, because think about the culture that we were raised in. Think about the expectations of beauty and intelligence and wealth that are put in front of us when we're like born, especially in the United States. I mean, like everything in this country revolves around money and power. Everything.
For sure. Everything.
And so you're right. Like, how do we uncomplicate all of this? How do we untether ourselves from these like really stringent and just completely unmanageable expectations that we're all setting out for ourselves, that like, I feel like nobody sat back and was like, wait, why are these the expectations?
Yeah.
Like, aside from history and culture that like dates back to 1770, whatever, like what are we doing here? Yeah. And it's funny to me. This is why I was so excited to come on to this particular show, is because, you know, I'll go to these seminars or like panel discussions, and I'll see people sitting on a stage who all profess to have some level of knowledge or expertise in whatever the industry is, podcasting being my current one. And I'll sit there and I'll listen to people say, this is how it's done. Here are the things that you have to do in order to make that happen. And I sit there and I think to myself 99% of the time, there's no way in hell that's A, the path that I want to take, or B, the path that is possible for me. That path is not possible for me. So to sit here and to lecture a group of people, most of the time unintentionally, winds up making people feel bad and actually ends up, I think, preventing them from doing the very thing that you're trying to inspire them to do. And I'm just speaking from experience because I'm unbelievably sensitive and everything makes me cry. Everything makes me upset. And it's something I've had to work on. It's like why I stopped drinking. And like,
I'm also a sensitive boy. So I got it. Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with being sensitive.
Not at all.
It actually is a superpower. But the grain of salt component to those kinds of situations where like an expert is talking, it's just like, well, first of all, what does the word expert mean? That feels subjective to me. Second of all, like, did you ask me any questions about like what my background is and what brought me to this room to like try to learn from you? No. And so like, now that like this body of work that I've built over the past 4 years with All American Ruins has started to gain traction, suddenly people are like, hey, will you come speak at this thing? Hey, will you come do this thing? And every time I do, the first thing I do, first of all, don't put me on a stage because first of all, it's embarrassing. But also, like, I'm going to get onto the same level as everybody else because that's where we all are anyway. And I'm going to level with you and say, like, this all happened to me, and it would take me a full 37 and a half years to explain how this happened to me because that was my life. That's how many years I've been alive. And every single second of that is what led to this very moment. And so, like, I can tell you my experience, but take it with a grain of salt, babe, because, like, this is not the font. It is a suggestion.
So specific to like experience and expertise and all that stuff, this is extremely top of mind for me right now.
Oh, interesting.
For a few reasons. I'm going to try and unpack them in the most succinct way possible.
Sure.
So my journey kind of looked like starting in music and audio, and I couldn't make a living doing that. And I found film and video, and I could make a living doing that. And I spent a decade doing that. And I still do it. I mean, that's still my industry. However, the path was, if you want to be taken seriously or build a career out of it, it's like work on bigger and better jobs with bigger and more well-funded productions. And eventually, if you want to be a cinematographer who's working on big stuff, and I've had those people in the studio before, it's like you eventually join the union and blah, blah, blah. And there's like this whole preset thing, right? There's this whole preset thing, which is completely antithetical to how I came up in filmmaking. It just that very specific, like small period of time in my life, like that whole thing, that whole journey, that whole path, not at all the world I was brought into.
Totally.
And now I see people going down that road and they're around our age, like mid 30s to mid 40s, let's say, like in that 10-year time span. And so many of them, not all, but so many are like single or, in relationships or marriages that either aren't doing well or have fallen apart, or they want to have kids and they can't afford to have kids and like blah, 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 like pick something, and they can't do it because they've gone down this path that was like assigned to this industry. It's like, if you want to be working on big stuff, this is how you need to do it. And I started going down that road for a minute until I was like, I don't know if this makes sense. Like, especially when you do life things that are important. So like, I got married, bought a house, I have a kid. Like, these are all...
Oh, right. I totally forgot about a kid.
I have a 3-year-old.
That is wild.
Yeah. Which is all awesome. Like, I love all of it.
Totally forgot that.
But it just doesn't mesh with like pre-existing things or pre-existing frameworks. So that's one thing, right? So I've been racking my brain, and why I've felt so kind of disjointed professionally lately is because I have all these disparate pieces that I walk around every day. I go, two things. I'm like, what do I actually do? Because it looks like a lot of different things. And then what am I actually an expert in? To bring it back to what you were talking about.
Oh, interesting.
Right? And so I'm very similarly disposed to you, where it's like, everybody likes acknowledgement, right?
No question.
Everybody likes acknowledgement, likes a pat on the back, and effectively wants to hear you did a good job, right?
Yeah, it's what keeps us going.
Of course. When I was younger, I needed that a lot more, or I made it a bigger part of my identity. But even now that it's less, it doesn't mean that I still don't like to be acknowledge that it's like, hey, you're doing good work.
Yeah.
Right. And that's happened in a couple of like really interesting under the radar ways recently. But I don't want to be put up on a pedestal, you know?
Absolutely.
I don't want to be the person like what you were saying. Like now your podcast is taking off. So now you have people coming out of the woodwork to be like, come speak at this and come do this and tell us how you did that.
Yes.
And it's like,
wild.
And that's all well and good. It makes you an expert at being you, and it makes you an expert at
That part.
Yeah, it makes you an expert at you. It doesn't make you an expert at other people.
That part is so critical to this entire dialogue.
Yeah.
And when I think about people that let me actually backtrack here. When I walked into this room this morning, that door opened, and the first thing that I did was marvel at what you had set up.
Thank you.
And the first thing that you did was defend what you felt like was not enough yet.
That's true.
Immediately, you said thank you. You acknowledged that I gave you a compliment at how beautiful this space looks. And then you immediately, without acknowledging anything else about how cool this is, you dove into, well, we need to get this set up in the skylight. We want to do this thing and this, that, and the other.
Well, I stare at it all day long, you know.
Of course.
Yeah.
But it's more than just staring at it all day long. We trick ourselves, I think, into thinking that we're not the best at being Drew English. We're not the best at being Blake Pfeil. And so to protect ourselves, we immediately do things like, oh, well, you know, here are the things that I'm working on. And it's like, I'm glad to hear that. That's so great. And also, let's talk about the fact that you have mic stands that, yeah, maybe they fall, but you got them. You put up
I fixed the falling.
And you fixed the falling. You had a solution.
Yeah.
You put up these walls. You told me about what's behind the walls that makes it more impressive. I mean, there's a lot in here that to me says, oh, Drew English is really good at being Drew English. Like he's clearly mastering. It may feel chaotic to you, especially because you have OCD and like there's all sorts of things that I can imagine would like make that challenging. But like, damn, man, you have a Keurig. Like, so many people don't have a Keurig.
We can thank my wife for that one.
And thank your wife.
Yes.
And like, but even that, like, this, you immediately said, well, that's my wife's doing. Right. But you guys have a relationship that is successful.
Point taken.
You know what I mean? And so,
Absolutely.
like, anyway, this is all to say that, like, yes, like, the mastery of self is so, it's an amazing thing to recognize. And I'm glad to hear other people think about that because that is truly what happens when I like, even, dude, so went to the Ambies.
Yeah.
They're the Academy Awards of podcasting.
I know.
Was there previously, was nominated last year in a completely different category that like.
Didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, it was like, I was like playing hardball with people that like, it was amazing. It was amazing. But I had no business being in the category I was in last year.
Okay.
And somehow it still happened. This year, the nominations list comes out and I see the other podcasts that I'm up against. And these are some of, to me, the most forward-thinking, extraordinary pieces of content and brands that are coming out saying really important things. And the first thing I did was, well, there's no way I'm going to win. They're better at being themselves than I am at being me. That was my thinking. So when they called my name, and like, let's get this straight, it's a popularity contest. Like, they have a blue ribbon panel that gets, 7 nominations whittled down from blah, blah, blah number. And then it's turned over to a voting body.
Sure.
It's turned over to an academy. So it becomes a popularity contest and who can, this, that, and the other thing. So like really, when you hear someone say it's an honor just to be nominated, like that's actually very true.
That's actually a real thing.
That's legit because you did have professionals who anyway, point is, they said the name of my show. I instantly blacked out. Could not tell you how many steps it took to get up to the stage. As it turns out, I went the wrong way.
Perfect.
I was supposed to go around and I didn't do that. Don't remember it. And you can hear in my voice, if you go watch the tape, I'm like shaking because all I could think of in that moment was, I don't belong here. Tig Notaro is standing directly behind me. Ronan Farrow is backstage. Matt Rogers, I just looked at him a number of times and, oh, there's Ira Glass. I have no business being up here. And so that blackout was a full blackout, but any messaging that was coming through, like connectivity in my brain was, you don't belong here. How did you, and like all of these things that was like, you don't belong here. Well, it's a voting body. What I just said, like it is, we're constantly, what I'm trying to say is we're constantly knocking ourselves down, and it will be my lifelong work to push against that instinct to talk shit about myself. Because let's be real, every episode of the podcast alone, notwithstanding the docuseries or the blog or the photos, every episode of that series takes roughly 55 hours to produce soup to nuts. I have a full-time job on top of that.
Yeah.
I host a radio program every week from 9 to 11 p.m. live. And I have a dog and a boyfriend and a house that I have to pay a mortgage on. Like, I'm doing fine.
Yeah.
I'm doing fine.
Yeah.
Win this Ambie, huge deal for me. The coolest thing that's ever happened, for sure. Literally 1 week later, I did not get into Tribeca Audio, and I spent 3 days moping. It was as if the Ambie didn't even exist. Happen. Isn't that crazy?
I mean,
and all I could think of was, well, the people who won the Ambie and are in Tribeca, they clearly are more mastered at themselves than I am at me. That's insane.
Yes, but it's believable.
Totally.
Because everybody does that.
Totally.
Everybody does that. The goalposts always move, whether you intend them to or not. Everybody does that. I've done that. It's, I've spent a lot of time talking about it. I can't remember. I've probably said it on here too, but like the whole like arrival fallacy concept, where it's like, this is a little bit different, but the idea of like, you set a goal for yourself and like you hit that goal and you just say, oh, if I could just make this much money a day, or if I could just achieve this, then I'll be happy. But it's not true, because achieving the goals isn't achieving happiness. It's like, in the best case scenario, it's like validating that you're on some kind of correct trajectory for yourself.
Yes.
But it's learning to be, and this is advice I should absolutely take for myself, leaning into being satisfied with being on the journey and not necessarily knowing what comes next.
Yeah.
Rather than hitting goals, because to your point, the goals don't matter. You won an Ambie, and then you didn't get into Tribeca Audio, and you sat around and moped for a few days.
3 days. Yeah. 3 days. Yeah, and like, I don't know. I think what's so funny about all of that too is like, I have no memory of actually being on stage holding the Dummy Award and saying words.
That's wild. That's actually pretty funny.
Yeah. I have absolutely no memory of being whisked backstage and having to like talk to people on camera and walk down a red carpet and do like, couldn't tell you. What I do remember is that my boyfriend got to go with me, so he got to see me win. Two of my dearest friends in the whole wide world, my late best friend's sister, her kid, they were all there. That's what I remember.
Exactly.
And it's like, oh, right. There's this quote in the movie. Have you ever seen the movie The Hours?
No.
With Nicole Kidman?
No.
It's what she won the Oscar for in 2002. And Meryl Streep's character at one point, she says to Ed Harris's character, well, that is what we do. That is what people do. We stay alive for each other. I don't stay alive because I get a podcast award. I stay alive because I get to go sit in a room with people I love and celebrate the fact that I made something and it got acknowledged. But It was the people that I'll remember. I'll remember the dinner that we went to afterwards for the rest of my life. Couldn't tell you what I said on that stage.
It also doesn't matter.
It doesn't
matter. Nope.
It does not matter, because what's going to happen is that trophy's going to come in the mail.
Yep.
I'm going to put it up. I'm going to feel good about it for 24 hours. And then I'll forget it's there, because my dog's going to piss on the floor and I have to clean it up and take the dog outside.
Eventually,
That's what
it will become a thing on the shelf that you go, oh yeah, it was cool when that happened.
That was so cool.
Yeah.
Oh, and this was the other thing I was going to say. Sorry, really quick.
No, you're fine.
Maybe a decade ago, so 2011 or 2012, my friend Robin, he is a 3-time Tony nominee.
Sure.
He told me, we were in a van going to New Jersey for this gala that we were singing at.
As one does.
Yeah. And I'm sitting next to him, and he winds up telling me that after his first Tony nomination for In the Heights, he went into the single worst year of his entire life because he didn't win. And I'll never forget that, because at the time it was so striking to me. And he was like, and what I realized, and it was what you were saying, I had moved the goalpost too far away from me. And it wasn't my time yet. And guess what? It may never be my time. The goalpost wasn't getting into a Broadway show, getting nominated for a Tony next to Lin-Manuel Miranda. The goal is doing something that makes me so happy that I could burst into a million pieces. And I often think about that, because it is such a like solvent reminder of like, yeah, like, how about we actually just like get rid of goalposts altogether, just to see what that looks like. Obviously, goals are great. We have to have goals. We have to have intentional, ways of doing things. But like, that's just not the path that I want. Yeah. I don't want to go into a dark depression for a year that takes me out of doing the work that I love altogether because I didn't win some fucking award. Like, who cares?
And then the immediate follow-up question that I could ask,
please,
but I don't think matters, is the easy question to ask would be, what do you want? But it doesn't matter. Because oftentimes, and I found, because I'm going through this right now, somebody says, what do you want? I don't know. I mean, I can tell you like important life things I want. I want my daughter to be happy and healthy and like all this stuff, right? But like professionally or career or whatever, if somebody said, what do you want? I don't know, but I know what I don't want. And that's more important. So like, you're able to sit here and say, well, this is what I don't want.
Yeah.
I don't know what I do want, but that comes with time and effort, and you figure it out
totally
as you go. But a lot of times it's more important to know what you don't want.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
And that causes some, at least for me, that causes some friction because for me, I don't know what it's like for you, but for me, I have like this identity that I've built up over a long time professionally that feels in conflict from like where I want to, I don't know where I want to land, but kind of like the lifestyle I want to have and like that, right? It feels like They feel like they're butting heads a little bit. So yeah, it's I mean, this whole run has been like really interesting because you just, and it's probably a good time to start talking about it. We will, but it's like, you're doing something because you love doing it.
So much.
Right. And because you love doing it and because you're very authentic about it, then that is, it's manifesting things to come your way.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're just trying to figure out what to do with those things. But you do know that you don't want to be put on a pedestal, and you don't want people to think you're some like inaccessible expert, and you don't want to be put on a stage to like talk at people and say, just do things my way. And this will solve all your problems.
Yeah.
That's bullshit. Of course not. Because your way is not my way, is not somebody else's way. So it's all really interesting. But it's a great time, because if I don't do it now, we will just talk and not actually talk about the podcast and All American Ruins and all this stuff.
Sure.
And it's kind of at the crux of what we were just discussing. But, we met last year. A common contact put us in touch. So we got together and we had a really good conversation. I knew you were doing podcasting, but this was like way before any of this Ambie's craziness. As a side note, because we have been messaging back and forth about having you come in to do this. And then somewhere in the middle of that, you posted something where you're like, oh, nominated for an Ambie. And I just remember seeing the image for your show next to 99% Invisible. And I'm like, holy shit.
Yeah,
because like
wild.
99PI is like OG, like top tier podcast. Roman Mars is the best. That is the show that got me interested in podcasts in general.
Really? Oh, no way.
So the podcast is called Abandoned All-American Ruins or something of that. What is the official name of the podcast?
No, that's great. So the body of work is called All-American Ruins.
That's a better way to put it.
Underneath that banner, there are 3 large components. There is the original blog, which is where everything started. There is the immersive audio series, which is called Abandoned: the All-American Ruins podcast, which I did because I knew that if people are Googling something, they're not going to Google All-American Ruins. They're going to Google Abandoned Podcast. And so having both words in the title has fortunately been a blessing. It confuses people sometimes, but I don't really care. Like, I wanted more people to listen to the show because I worked hard on it.
Yeah.
So there's that. And then there's the Hudsey series, which is simply called All-American Ruins. It is a series of 4 short films that range from documentary style into more experimental narrative. The common thread between all of them is each piece, whether it be a blog essay, a podcast episode, or a docu episode, every single piece is a retelling of my experiences exploring abandoned spaces all over the world through a fantastical lens. And the reason that I set that world up, first of all, let's just get one thing straight. It was never my intention. None of this was intended. None of this, I didn't think 4 years ago, I'm going to build this bot. No, like, we were in COVID. I was scared. I did not want to go on the trails in the beautiful Hudson Valley where we live because I was afraid. So I started exploring abandoned buildings, which is something that I did when I was a kid that taught me how to use my imagination as a tool for healing at very difficult moments. It just so happens that abandoned spaces, because they represent a time gone by, I've always been a very whimsical, romantic person who loves the notion of time travel. So for whatever reason, they have always triggered my imagination to kind of go buck wild. I looked at, I got into the urban exploration space. And realized there were just exorbitant numbers of photographers doing beautiful work, amazing videographers with millions of views on YouTube. But I'm a storyteller. That's like what I do at my 9 to 5. People are like, what do you do as your job? I'm like, I work in storytelling. I know that's a hard concept to understand, but that's literally my salaried position and I make a good living doing it. So everything that I do is rooted in storytelling. What can I bring to this community that will add value to it and somehow add a little bit of my own personal flair into this gorgeous community of people? As I was wandering through these spaces, sort of reclaiming this hobby that I had when I was a kid, I realized that the same exact thing was happening. My imagination was sparking all of these questions about the history and the culture, what it means for the geographical region, how it relates to the economy, what it says about America, while simultaneously making friends with ghosts and talking to imaginary friends. And so this is all to say that every story fantastically recreates my experiences while simultaneously asking really critical questions about America and also exposing personal journals about my journey with mental health and addiction.
Mm.
And it kind of just happened that way.
Yeah.
Like I started writing and I just let my pen keep moving. And then suddenly these stories existed. And then suddenly Radio Kingston was like, hey, you should make a podcast. And I was like, I'm going to do a thing that I have no training in. Never have I worked in audio ever in my life. But it felt good and it felt right. And so that's kind of why I love the project. And Abandoned seems to be the thing that people have taken to the most, which is great because I have always been a huge fan of radio dramas. And so I've really tried to build these immersive soundscapes that asks the listener, hey, why don't you just like turn this off for 20 minutes?
Yeah.
Why don't you flip it over? And why don't you take a little journey with me, take a break, and like, let's go use our imaginations together. We're living in a time where everything is fat. When you said that this podcast recording session was 2 hours, I was so excited because I was like, oh my God, a fucking bitch who takes their time. Like,
Right.
Let's take our time and listen to each other. And like, we don't have to move that quickly. Remember when we were kids and we didn't have to call people back if they left a voicemail right away?
It was amazing.
Why do I have to respond to your text right away? I don't have to do that. I don't have to do anything, actually. I'm not going to. And I have friends who are like, did you get my text? I'm like, babe, you sent it 12 minutes ago.
Yeah.
No, I did not get your text yet. I'm in my day. So anyway, long-winded way to say, I wanted to offer the Urbex community a piece of my voice that invited folks to slow down and just like let their imaginations kind of do a little bit of the healing magic. Because our imagination, creativity and wonderment, for sure. It also is a space of healing and transformation. It allows us to think outside of what we have deemed possible and find a little bit of a salve in that.
So I'm curious about.
Did I answer the question that you asked me? I don't know what question that was.
I just wanted to know about the project, and you unpack that in great detail.
Excellent.
Yeah, but so I'm curious about like the healing part, right? Because I can draw a couple of like really quick through lines to like what makes the show, or rather the project in general, appealing, right? I've always loved like abandoned spaces, urban decay.
Oh, amazing.
I've always kept photography as a hobby for myself, and all the things that I'm drawn to take photos of are just like the juxtaposition of, crumbling industry meets nature and like how that's getting taken over, right? I never went deep down the Urbex rabbit hole, but that's like aesthetically where I really gravitate to for a lot of reasons. It's like, the time travel aspect, like what imagine what this used to be like. And, what if people weren't here anymore, and like all this stuff that's kind of common, right?
Totally.
And I think people really relate to. But what for me is kind of out of left field is the healing aspect. So I'm curious, like, can you unravel that a little bit more? Like, how does being in an abandoned space and unlocking your imagination on that level equate healing for you?
That is a great question. So I'm an addict in recovery.
Sure.
I've been in recovery for over 12 years. Addicts, what the action that they are taking when they do a drug is an attempt to escape reality. So for me, that is no longer an option. I can't, crush up a Percocet and snort it anymore. That's not possible because I was killing myself.
Right.
What is possible is, how can I reframe this natural inclination I have to want to escape every once in a while into a healthy space that encourages me to be creative and also gives me a sense of pause in the middle of a very chaotic world. Well, when you wander into an abandoned house in the middle of the woods in Finland, it's just you and the ghosts. And in that solitude, I was able to not just find that escapism quality, but I was able to reconnect with myself, reconnect with the kid in me who I departed from for at least 2 decades because I fell into addiction. I fell into the world of addiction. And so it's a moment of finding what feels like true sanctuary. And that silence really just, there's something about breathing. I don't know if you've heard about breathing, but apparently it's really good for you.
I feel like all humans need to do that.
Oh my God. I mean, even in this episode, I'm sure if we tracked back over the footage from this episode, we could count at least 53 fucktillion times a second where I'm not breathing.
Right.
Because it's just not a natural thing for us.
Yeah.
When I'm in these spaces, I suddenly find myself being able to breathe again because it's just me. And there's a safety quality to that. Everybody deserves a sanctuary. Everybody deserves a sanctuary. But sometimes a familiar sanctuary can trigger a lack of peace. If I see a picture of my late best friend on the mantle, who is now dead, that's sometimes going to make me feel really happy and good to see her face. And other times, it's going to cause pain. And so abandoned spaces in that way, they provided an out for me, but they also provided an in to myself. And I think that's the power of ghosts. Ghosts ask us to ask really hard questions about ourselves, and find peace in who we are. So
I could see that specific aspect not only being like an unexpected thing for, let's just say, listeners, because it seems like there's a lot of traction around the podcast at the moment. So like, let's just say unexpected for listeners, but also something that winds up being welcome because it's something that people aren't confronted with a bunch. And like, to your point, everything feels so fast.
Yeah.
And so many things feel like homogenized right now. And to take it even another step back where we're talking about expertise, you know, how I feel is I'm just like, well, sure. Everything feels so homogenized, right? It's like, I have this feeling here. That I'm like, oh, there's more I want to do. There's more I want to say. I know there's more I can offer, but like, what is it? Because a big part of that is like, so much of what you take in all day long is just fast, the same crap all the time, just repackaged in different ways. And it's a little exhausting. So having a different perspective that you're offering to listeners, I could see as super appealing. It's definitely appealing to me. Breathing, oh man, so important. And I definitely don't do it as much as I should.
Truly never breathe.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah. Like you breathe autonomously to survive, but
But
the deep breath, the release, the like really like bringing yourself down.
Yeah.
This is something I have been working on in therapy. Is
good
because I get if I get stressed about something or I latch onto something, it's very hard for me to like bring myself down.
Yeah, it's challenging. Well, that's the world we live in.
Totally.
And, I had this, my voice and speech teacher in college, Amelia Broom. She's from Georgia. She's very, very gentle woman, has a mouth of a sailor. And she would, we would be doing exercises or whatever and, blah, 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 and all this shit. And she would come up to me and she would just like put one hand on my belly and one hand on my back. And she would just go, "Now, I just want you to say, fuck it." Just like this sweet, sweet Georgian woman, gorgeous, like a true Southern belle. "Say it with me. Fuck it." No, Blake. "I just want you to breathe into your hoo-ha." You know what I'm saying? Like, she was the best. And the biggest compliment that I have gotten with this show that I I just love it so much. If you go into Reddit and you look up All American Ruins, every single one of the reviews, in some way, shape, or form, says, I don't think it's the narrator's intention to put me to sleep, but that's what happens, is I wind up never finishing an episode because by 10 minutes in, I've put people to sleep.
For the record, there are absolutely podcasts out there whose sole purpose for existing is to put people to sleep.
Absolutely. We don't, first of all, we don't sleep enough. None of us sleep enough. It's impossible. That our nervous systems are just absolutely
If I had it my
traumatized.
way, I would go to bed at 8 p.m. and wake up at 8 a.m.
No question. Absolutely. And so I guess that's also just like a side note is like, if I'm protecting a person's nervous system for another night, awesome. That's great. So anyway, that's the show.
Super cool. But that's only one, it's only one facet, and it's so funny because and clearly I will link to things in the show notes, but if you go to your website, your personal website, you have the All American Ruins Project, but you are called a multidisciplinary artist. And it's very true. Like, you're one of the few people that I've gone to their website and looked at what they're doing, and writing, photography, music, all these different things. I guess if I have a question around that, it's just like the common knowledge, or the common, no, not knowledge, the common advice would be, you got to choose a lane, right? You got to choose the lane. And you are very clearly going against that grain.
And have been for a long time.
Okay. And so why? And what does that do for you? Why do you throw so much at the wall openly and publicly instead of saying, I'm Blake, this is what I do, blah, 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 blah?
When I was a kid, you could not land me in front of one thing and tell me that's all you can do for the rest of your life. And in fact, anytime I expressed interest in, now I want to look at radio because the Christian radio station that I listen to broadcasts Dragnet from 9 to 11 every night, and it's fascinating to me. Who's making those noises? Who are those actors? This is bringing me into a world of film because now I'm addicted to Alfred Hitchcock and I want to be a filmmaker. And that's really cool. Who wrote the screenplay to Psycho? It's based off of a book. I can write books. That's really cool. Who's Robert Bloch? What did he do? There's journalism here? We get to be on TV and report the news? That's really, you can write about that in magazines? Like you can, that's really, really exciting. You can own a magazine. You could That's how it happened. It was always, here's the portal, and then it leads me to another portal, and then another portal. And I never, ever could stop it. Now, from I'd say like the age of 13 to 24, right when I got sober, people told me, hey, you're really good at acting, so you should do that. You're really good on stage. You really know how to sing. You're good at musicals. That's what you should do. I was 13 years old. I didn't have the wherewithal to be like, but what about all the other things that I love? Those are important to me too. I didn't know that that's what was important to me because I listened to the grown-ups. Because we listened to grown-ups as kids. I had no formative conscious understanding of the idea that I could be like, whoa, wait a minute. That doesn't make any sense. I love musical theater and I would be happy to go get a BFA in musical theater or what I call BFA in feelings. But the thing is that it didn't always make me happy. And to this day, every once in a while, a Stephen Sondheim cast album will pop up on my shuffle and I'll be like, oh my God, I love this. Other days, that exact same Stephen Sondheim musical will pop up on my shuffle and I'm like, I'm listening to Ariana Grande right now, bitch. I don't want your complicated, dissonant musical theater crap in my ears. Like, I don't want to do that right now.
You don't want your Into the Woods cast recording?
No, I don't want that. I mean, sometimes I do.
Sure.
Sometimes it's really nice to hear Danielle Furlan singing Nice is Different Than Good. That's amazing. It's brilliant, but I don't want to do that all the time. Like, variety has always been, and like, recently, my colleague was like, hey, have you ever been like examined for ADHD? And I was like, no, like that's a popular trend. People are just calling themselves ADHD. They're slapping that. He's like, no. Like, you really should consider getting tested for it. And so I called my mom and I was like, hey, like, you told me when I was 16 that I was probably an addict. Did we ever like get me tested for ADHD? And she was like, oh no, because it was obvious that you had it. And I was like, bitch, like, what? So I would imagine that a lot of this leans into this undiagnosed ADHD that possibly that I have. And like, honestly, who doesn't have a little bit of ADHD?
Oh, I definitely struggle with that.
No
stuff.
question.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is all to say that like, for years, I was like, from 13 to 24, I was like, I have to do BFA musical theater, and then I have to go to New York City and I have to be on Broadway. And all of my professors in college were like, yep, that's what you should do. You have to go be on Broadway. And then senior year, February of 2010, my friend Marvelyn told me that she was auditioning to work at a children's theater company in South Korea, where they developed ESL children's musicals for the Korean government. She said, they're looking for 2 people. You've traveled quite a bit. Would you like to audition with me? And I was like, hell yeah. Because what they were looking for was an actress who had experience directing and an actor who had experience songwriting. And that kind of fit the bill. And so we auditioned and we got it. And all of my professors in college were like, you're crazy if you take that job and move to South Korea for a year. And that was the first moment where I was like, I thought I was preparing for life here, folks. I don't think that I spent all this time in musical theater school also doing like a radio minor on the side and like taking songwriting classes at Berkeley. Like, I thought I was preparing to like try a bunch of stuff. And I got into a very emotional conversation with my late head of my program, Stephen Terrell, one of the most brilliant people on the planet Earth, because he was so confused. He couldn't fathom that like you just spent 4 years singing Sondheim material and studying Shakespeare, and you're going to move to South Korea and write ESL children's music. He couldn't get it. But he was of a generation that was like, you stick to the one thing and
Correct.
you do that one thing forever.
Correct.
And that just never worked for me. It just has never worked.
Same.
And so, yeah, well, I mean, look at your studio. It's covered in all different kinds of equipment you do all sorts of things. And so like, I think even after I moved to New York after South Korea, I was an actor for like a good 2 years. And then I fell off a building because I was fucked up and I got sober. At that point, I think I carried a lot of shame that I didn't realize about not really going all in on musical theater the way that I was told that I was supposed to because I was good at it. And it wasn't until COVID, again, being inside of abandoned spaces alone, looking at the past and realizing, oh my God, like, I don't need to carry this shame anymore. This is who I am. And so at that point, I don't know, maybe 3 years into COVID, I looked at my website and I was like, this doesn't make sense to me. This is not who I am. It's confusing and there's no roadmap to help people really understand, what do you do? And so I was like, well, I am a stage actor. I've worked in film and television. I work in radio. I work in podcasting. I've written for magazines. Like, I do a lot of things. There's one word in the history of words that can really condense all of that into a single identity, and it is multidisciplinary.
Yeah.
That's what I do. And yeah, sometimes I write essays for Business Insider. Sometimes I produce short docuseries with a local production company and platform. I am so glad that I figured this out before I was 40 because it caused a lot of um it I felt bad about myself for years because I was like, shouldn't I have this? Shouldn't I have that? And it's like, no, babe, like that is not the system that you were born into. That like system meaning that's not what happened to you. Your spirit, unfortunately, is not that way. Fortunately, you've caught on to that. And now you've really sunken into that, not just because it's who you are, but because you found or were led to this body of work that has encouraged you to do all of those things in one solvent space. That's a fucking gift. And I wish that for anybody who has varied multiple interests to be able to find that thing. Sorry, to find that thing. I'm like an Italian. I'm like, "Bleh." To find the thing, the body of work that allows them to explore all their things too.
I'm really locked into what you're saying because I'm a man in his 40s who feels like now he's starting to have that conversation with himself, right? And yeah, man, I don't know. I think, your professor saying, "Oh, you're crazy. Like, why wouldn't you do?
He's like
Why wouldn't you
mad
do
at me.
Yeah, but that was their projection onto you
Totally.
for their own reasons.
Totally. And I think that he also felt a sense of subconscious guilt that he himself didn't explore other avenues.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Sorry.
That's what I'm saying. That's the projection.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas, I went to recording school, like,
Which is cool. It's very cool.
But also, I have a bachelor's of music, which is like,
I know,
whatever.
I know, BFA in musical theater, man. Like,
Yeah.
What are we doing?
But it's the whole thing was like training you to go work in recording studios, and generationally, the way every like major pivot in life has lined up for me also coincides with the world kind of fucking falling apart. So it's
No question.
So it's like I graduated from recording school just as recording studios were disappearing and everybody was making albums in their bedroom on their laptop. Cool. Great. Awesome. So then, I got a job. I got like a desk job, a tech support job right out of college because I needed to like make some money. And I was like singing and playing in a band and I was going to be a rock star. So nothing else mattered. And that clearly worked out. And then I got kind of complacent, and right around the time I was like, oh, I got to get out of here. Like, I'm going to lose my mind. Then I got laid off on Obama's first inauguration day because it was like financial crisis.
Wow.
Yeah. I got laid off, which
sure
started this whole roller coaster, some good, some bad. But had it not happened, none of this would be happening.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying it's good or bad. I guess it's a long-winded way of saying that, like, I am of the opinion that, yeah, you should have done that audition and gone to South Korea, because if I had to do it all over again, knowing what I know now, it's like, yeah, you're just living life. Like, I wouldn't have gotten a desk job out of college. I would have taken a year off and gone traveled, do something, so it's like everybody feels like they're playing catch up in their own way. It's
No
like
question.
I carry shame around stuff that I'm like working through. I mean, I think that's normal.
Oh, yeah. We are a shame-driven society.
For sure. That being said, it's like I was very locked in with what you were saying because I am somebody who has a ton of different interests,
And thank God.
Yeah. But the problem is that we live in a world where it's like you're supposed to take all those and put them in a box that's easy for people to understand.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm struggling too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why I said, God forbid every artist or maker who has varied interests finds a landing pad like All American Ruins, where suddenly you are encouraged to explore all of those things.
Right.
And not just encouraged, but going back to the conversation from before, lauded for it. People think it's amazing and are celebrating the fact that All American Ruins has continued to evolve of its own volition. That's what it was going to do no matter what I did. I just grabbed the tail and said, take me where you want to go, babe, and I will follow you.
Oh, that's interesting. So you feel like it's how do I want to say it? You feel like it's kind of something that is outside of yourself that you're just like riding the wave of, even though it's your thing that you're making?
Oh yeah. I mean, like to quote Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, she has a TED Talk that I think I would consider my Bible. If I could get the entire thing tattooed on my back without any pain, I would. But the title of the TED Talk is Your Elusive Creative Genius. And in that, she discusses the fact that, the Renaissance came around and suddenly all of these artists who referred to not being a genius, but having a genius, which she describes as like Dobby the house elf, suddenly everything became driven from the self. And it created all of this pressure. And then suddenly you have people like Ernest Hemingway who are drinking gin at 3 o'clock in the morning and killing themselves because the genius isn't always coming to them. They're not always the genius. Like they can't. So her suggestion, or like what she poses, is why don't we go back to the way that it was in the Greeks and the Romans era, when people weren't geniuses, they had a genius. And sometimes the genius would show up to the desk that day. And many times the genius wouldn't. And oftentimes the genius may only show up once and then disappear. It's like Robin's Tony nomination. That may have been his one little glimpse at having that genius who decided to enter him and create this beautiful thing that he felt really compelled to do. All American Ruins was born out of doing The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, which is, as many people know, but if you don't, it is a self-driven 12-week workbook, essentially, that invites you to completely rethink the trauma that goes along with being an artist and find the fun in it. And again, Elizabeth Gilbert modeled a lot of her TED Talk off of Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way.
It's interesting. I've never read it. I've done morning pages out of it, like, but because I've come to morning pages through other avenues, but I've never actually read the book, and this makes me want to now read the book.
Dude, I can safely say that Julia Cameron saved my life. I was so ashamed, like I said.
Yeah.
I had nowhere to go. COVID was raging. I was so down and out, and this book came across my desk. And she invited me to come back to myself. And I think another reason that the book resonated with me so much is because it's like literally modeled after the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yeah.
But in that book, I was able to find the morning pages.
Yep.
And through those morning pages, suddenly I found my hand was writing about these experiences that I was having inside of these abandoned spaces. Those stories were born out of the morning pages.
Very
if
cool.
you go back and you look at my journals, the first All American Ruins story is literally word for word, almost, written into those morning pages. So, yes, I have decided that, no, I don't think there's like a mystical magic Dobby the house elf fairy living in the walls and like giving me all of this inspiration. I don't think that at all. I think I'm an artist who figured out what I was really good at and found a landing pad that allowed me to explore all of those avenues. And I never once put strategy into like outlining what the thing was going to be. I learned to do that over the course of it happening. But if you listen to the first season of Abandoned versus the third season, it is a vast difference. And when people kind of started catching on to the show, I had people at places like Audible being like, hey, we would love to actually give you money to produce a season, but you're going to have to go back and fix all of these things that need fixing in season 1. And I was like, no, thanks. I love that I have a record of my growth.
Yeah.
I love that I can hear episode 1 from season 1 and episode 12 from season 3 and hear, oh my God, I have learned something and I have mastered a skill, and you can hear it. That's beautiful to me. That's so much more important to me than, $100,000 to make a 4th season. Like, I don't want to do that.
But also, it takes, whether you recognize it or not, it takes a lot of like inherent strength and like resolve to say like, I'm good.
Totally.
To somebody or an organization that's really well known that is offering you like something, not exactly on a silver platter, but close to it, to be like, hey, here's an opportunity, but you need to like kind of fit within our box again. So that whether you actively recognize it or not, takes a lot of strength and resolve.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. And it's interesting to have like just It's interesting to have like, I always forget just how much gratitude I have to Julia Cameron for creating that workbook, because it really did save my life.
That's awesome.
And I have since subsequently paid it forward. In fact, the day that you and I met at Rough Draft, I had been wandering through the books in the shelves on the bookstore side, and I wound up talking to this, I believe she was a trombonist. And we started talking, and eventually it came up that I had done The Artist's Way, and she was super interested in like All American Ruins. And she was expressing that she had hit this roadblock where she was feeling really down and out about her work as a musician because she wanted to explore other stuff. And I told her, I was like, I really think you should do The Artist's Way. Anyway, long story short, she wandered off. We met. And then I went up to, I forget his name, the owner of Rough Draft. Anthony. I was like, Andrew's not right. And I asked him if they had a copy of The Artist's Way. And I bought it and I gave it to her.
That's so cool, man.
And she was like so struck by it. I was like, no. Just like do this. And if it resonates with you, then please give it to somebody else when you're done. We need to be doing this. Artists need to be supporting artists. Like full throttle. You need to show up at your friends' gigs. Even if you don't want to show up to your friends' gigs, you have to show up. You have to read the blog post that your friend put on Substack, even if you don't think that you have the time or don't want to. That's what generates the goodness in this world. And that's why art and the artist community is so kick-ass. Like we get to do that for one another, and we get to cheerlead each other and make ourselves feel good.
Well, that's like to go back to those moments that I've had recently where I get an email from a friend like, hey, please keep sending this newsletter or whatever you do. Like, hey, maybe this sounds stupid, but keep building what you're building. All the while I'm sitting here on the other side of the table going, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. Like literally I have no idea. I'm just like experimenting with things. But it's in concept the same thing. It's like those small little gestures and small moments of support are like so much more impactful than, going up on stage and blacking out at the Ambies. Because
100%.
You know what I mean?
And I asked you to be on this podcast. It was not the other way around.
That's true.
And it's because I asked you if I could come do this, because it was clear to me that you believed in the thing because you put the effort into it. And I was like, well, everything that he's doing obviously makes sense as an opportunity for me to go talk about my work. But really, I just want to go celebrate someone who's putting their fucking shit out there and doing it well.
Thanks, man.
That's important to me.
But it's like, I don't even know what the thing is. Like that's like, I don't even know what the thing is. But what I do know is that I love like sitting down with people and having conversations, because you never know where it's going to go.
Yeah.
And I still do it, depends on who I'm going to talk to, but it's like I used to be really like rigid about doing some sort of prep, right? And like, I'm not going to say this was prep. It's like, I'm familiar with your work, and I like did just a little poking around your website yesterday just to kind of like jog my memory, but I didn't like sit down and write down a bunch of questions and do all this stuff, because there's a certain level of rigidness with that makes the essence of the conversation like totally different. It's a little bit of a balance. It's like, I don't want to go into like a conversation with a perfect stranger totally blind.
Yeah. I mean, prep is important, but
half blind is fine.
Totally. And what always ends up happening, as you know, is you do all this prep work and then immediately...
Well, you make plans to not follow them at all.
100%. Like immediately that goes completely out the window. So yeah, you said to me, you were like, I don't mean to be insulting, but I've done basically no prep for this. And I was like, that's not true, actually, because we met and really got to know each other in an hour and a half of time.
Fair enough.
That to me is the preparation. It's just like catching people's vibe and being like, can we have an interesting conversation that hopefully will go out into the void and maybe inspire somebody to go buy The Artist's Way, or to stop feeling bad about the fact that they want to do tuba playing and also writing, you know?
Yeah.
That would be great.
Yeah. And it's you've definitely figured something out for yourself, right? Which the self is ever evolving, right? But you've clearly figured out something for yourself that is like inspiring to me, because to your point, I'm very good at putting myself down when I don't need to. And I'm not the only one who does that. Like, so many people do that, right? I'm not like calling myself out here, just by example. But it's inspiring to me because I've been fighting that fight again, and I know I keep harping on it, but it's like I've been fighting that fight of, well, what box do I fit into when I have all these different interests? You know, I have a bunch of guitars hanging downstairs in my basement that I like miss playing, and I want to do more with that. And I've been away from music regularly for a long time, and now I'm like feeling the itch to like get back into it a little bit more. And there's some resistance there, and I don't know why.
Well, thank God you have a daughter.
Yeah.
Daughter?
Yeah.
Thank God you have a daughter, because now that becomes an opportunity for you to model what you hope for her. I would imagine what you hope for her.
Totally.
Which is live a good life and feel good while doing it.
Absolutely.
Like, that's the bottom line. Let's all feel better about ourselves. Like we said at the beginning of this, we do not need to complicate everything. What we need to do is fall in love with ourselves. That's the most critical thing that we can possibly do, because then we can spread that joy to everybody else. And wouldn't that be cool if we could just like get a little more joy back in the picture? That would be great.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think we should finish right here.
I'm down.
I think that is a great place to wrap it up.
I do too.
The last thing, it's not a real conversation question.
Yeah.
It's just, where should people go to find out what you're doing and find out more about All American Ruins and like tell.
Yeah, you just go to blakepfeil.com.
How do you spell your last name though?
So can I do it the way that I listened to my mom do it with telemarketers for years?
Yes, please.
Blake is Lake with a B, and then P like Paul, F like Frank, E-I-L is my last name. So blakepfeil.com.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Dude, thanks so much for coming on.
Honor. Thank you for accepting my ask. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and you weren't lying. You do cry a bunch, and that's okay. It's a safe space.
Literally, in undergrad, my entire studio class called me the crier, because I would like go to start, Giants in the Sky from Into the Woods, and I'd be like, there are giants, it's just like break down. Everything is emotional. It's an emotional world.
Dude, it's safe space. It's all good.
Thank
you for being here.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Cool.
Appreciate it.
Okay, that's my conversation with Blake Pfeil. You can find all his work at blakepfeil.com. That's Pfeil. Be sure to check out Abandoned, the All American Ruins podcast podcast if you want to slow down and let your imagination wander through some abandoned spaces. As always, thanks for listening to No Set Path. If you like this conversation, again, please leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening, and like and subscribe on YouTube as well if that's where you're at. It really helps us out. Don't forget to check out my newsletter, Creative Balance, on Substack. Again, the address is thedrewenglish.substack.com. I write about creative entrepreneurship without the burnout. And until next time, take it easy.